Welcome to this Trowers and Hamlins podcast. My name is Yetunde Dania and I'm a partner at Trowers and Hamlins, and I also have the privilege of heading our Birmingham office. And I've also been in a senior leadership role for the last 6 years. Trowers and Hamlins and Lloyds have collaborated since 2024 on a Dragon's Den style competition called Launchpad. It takes place every year at the UK Black Business Show in both Birmingham and London. And Lloyds, along with Trowers, sponsored the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce's Black Business Collective, which launched last year in 2024. In this podcast, I'm excited to be speaking to Paul Kempster. Paul Kempster is Managing Director, Commercial Banking Coverage, Business and Commercial Banking at Lloyds Banking Group. Paul is an accountant and a senior leader with over 30 years' experience in financial services. He's also responsible for supporting approximately 1 million small and medium-sized businesses across the UK. These businesses cover all sectors, including real estate, healthcare, agriculture, and trading businesses, as well as product specialisms from working capital to trade and payments. Paul is also director and trustee at the Southwest Network. Welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast today. So I'd really like to set the scene of today's podcast. The Time to Change report, which was published in 2023, provided 10 recommendations to throw the spotlight on ethnic minority businesses. And the 10 recommendations were about the things that could be implemented that would result in the current contribution of those businesses, which is currently 25 billion, increasing to a whopping 100 billion pounds. And so I'm delighted that Paul is here with me today to talk about the collaboration that has taken place between Lloyds Banking Group and Trowers and Hamlins in relation to not only the Launchpad competition, but also in relation to the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce Black Business Collective. And so we're going to have a conversation today about business in general, about ethnic minority businesses and how they can be supported by both the financial sector and also the legal sector. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Yetunde. Lovely to see you. Thank you for having me.
And you. So I really wanted to start out by exploring what are the 3 challenges that ethnic minority businesses are currently facing.
Yeah, well, I think if I may, I'd probably just kick off broadly with small businesses. And for me, the context, and I know many people know this, but the context in the UK is we have 99.9% of all businesses in the UK are SME in size. And they also account for 60% of all private sector employment. Yeah. So it's really important. This is really important. Yeah. But then if we focus it a little bit onto small businesses, which I think is where I'd like to start, there's probably 2 or 3 key challenges, I would argue and observe that small businesses have a unique, have to face into on a unique basis compared to those slightly larger businesses. And the first area would be around financial resilience and access to capital. And I want to come on to Black-led businesses in a moment. But if we think about small businesses to start with, we know that businesses of a small size naturally operate on tighter margins. They have less of a financial cushion to absorb the things that entrepreneurs and business owners and operators need to deal with. And that means that when we have times of uncertainty or volatility, whether it's inflation, whether it's interest rate volatility, or indeed maybe more topically, because we've seen this in the last few years, supply chain challenges and volatility, it means that small businesses are not in such a luxurious position to be able to manage through those. And also access to finance, access to capital is something that we know is a key headline, but I wouldn't mind going into it in a bit more detail because there's a difference between demand for lending and capital versus the supply of it, essentially. And I think, we do observe systemically, I think in the UK across commercial banks, I would argue, And Lloyds, we're proud to bank 1 in 5 SMEs in the UK. So we kind of have a feel of a handle on this from a statistical perspective. There's been, I think, historically a challenge on that first challenge, access to lending, access to capital for small businesses. Perhaps arguably through some of the traditional ways of assessing risk for a small business. But I think that's getting better. Okay, and I'm really positive about that. And I could give you an example. And we think about different channels for small businesses accessing lending, using data in a much smarter way. And in my own business, we've launched in the last couple of years an app for lending for really small businesses. And that's really friction-free and it's much faster. But the real test is, has that stimulated demand and got capital into small businesses? And the answer for us is yes. We've seen a 250% increase in the demand for lending below £50,000 via a digital channel and an app which has been using data in a smarter way. That said, I'm not going to pretend that there's not a challenge here. So that's the first challenge. The second one I would say would be around capacity constraints in small businesses. And again, of course, because of the relative lack of size and scale in larger businesses, my business in Lloyds, in your business in Trowers, there is a degree of size and scale where we have, I would say, a luxury of having fantastic functional partners and experts, whether that's HR or legal or whether that might be. And of course, we know in really small businesses, that doesn't exist. It's pretty much the person, the entrepreneur who has to be the chief marketeer, answer the phone, deal with the legal issues, deal with the contracts. So that's obviously a challenge that uniquely small businesses face. And the third element for me would be around market visibility and network access. And I think that's probably the big one, which will, I think, lead into underserved communities, is just you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have scale, you don't have access necessarily to parts of an ecosystem or a supply chain or whatever it might be in a sector or an industry that could be a bit of a turning moment in the growth of your business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the other things that the report flagged up was the point around trust, which I find really interesting. And I've had certainly in the networks I've been in, people have talked about that trust element. Yetunde, we have no calls to instruct a lawyer in our private lives. And, I'm not sure about going into this corporate environment. And so we have at Trowers really prided ourselves in terms of bringing the local community into the local business district and saying it's not a scary place, you deserve to be here. So, those are some of the things that I think we can do to break down some of those barriers and increase that kind of trust. So I'm really interested to understand and hear a little bit more about why supporting Black businesses has become a strategic objective for Lloyds.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I just wanted to pick up on that trust point, if I could. And I completely agree. And there's a number of really, really well thought through reports, surveys in the last few years. And from a Lloyds Banking Group perspective, as you know, a few years ago, we commissioned our own extensive piece of work. And we published that in a report called Black, British in Business and Proud. And that really was quite sobering in many respects, and has been a really good foundation for things that we've been working through in the last 3 years, and I'm actually very proud of, but there's a lot to be done. Trust came out quite strongly in that. And the sobering voice of Black-led businesses, Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurial businesses was when they asked the question, do you trust your bank? Okay, which is quite a wide-ranging question. The answer that came back was 40% did.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
And that's, as I say, for me, quite sobering. All right. We'll maybe talk a bit about later progress that's been made, because I'm really pleased to say that's in a much elevated place compared to that. But in terms of why it's a strategic priority for Lloyds, I mean, first and foremost, and you will have heard this before from many of my colleagues, and our Chief Executive Officer as well, who leads from the front on this. The Lloyds Banking Group's purpose is helping Britain prosper, okay? And that is something that is, for me, is not a set of words, it's what it means in a business. And that prosper aspect flows through the entirety of the organisation. Now, I happen to work in commercial banking, okay? But Lloyds and other big systemically important banks are really quite broad and quite deep. And of course, they will, and Lloyds Banking Group do as well, have lots of quite complex divisions. It might be corporate and institutional, it might be consumer relationships, consumer lending, investments, pensions, insurance, so on and so forth. But the Helping Britain Prosper piece flows all the way through.
Yeah.
And from the purpose, and when we think about prosperity, you can only really access, elevate, stimulate prosperity. And I think most people would say the UK is after prosperity at the moment.
Yeah.
Whichever sector you sit in, whether you're in public sector, private sector, stakeholders would agree that we're looking for this prospering in society. We know that we cannot stimulate that as a systemically important business and bank without thinking about every aspect of our communities that we work within, we live within. And, Lloyds Banking Group has over 28 million customers across the UK, which is quite a big number. It also means, because of the breadth of the group, that we have a financial relationship with more than 1 in 2 UK adults.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you can't help Britain prosper unless you have a business strategy that's aligned to the communities that we serve, the client base that we're privileged to have, and think about it from every single aspect. And when it comes to Black-led businesses, in a particular sense, and we're talking here in a really important month of the year, we know from, and you know from all of our work and research and surveys and reports and listening to clients, prospective clients, stakeholders, that there are systemic differences and barriers. So that prosperity hasn't flowed historically as much as it should and as much as we want. And that's why all these actions take place. And that's why it's important.
I love that answer. And I think for me, coming into the space, because it's not naturally been my space previously, I honestly commend Lloyds in terms of what it's doing. And what I've been really impressed by is the fact that sometimes organisations will say these things and it's words.
Yeah.
But what I've seen from Lloyds is the action. And I think I said to you the other day, I've been really impressed by, the leadership actually turns up and turns out, from Charlie Nunn to the entire board, or a big percentage of it. And I think there was one event where I was told by one of your colleagues, we've had to get security in because there are so many, there's so many senior people here from the team. And I think that then expresses and demonstrates to the community that this is just not lip service. We're here. It's not a flash in the pan. And I think that's the bit that is really commendable.
Well, thank you. And that's really great to hear that feedback. And what I would say about, well, firstly, actually, it's quite interesting to get more security in because our executive are all in one place. We don't even let them fly on the same plane.
That's what I heard.
But that's a really nice problem to have, isn't it? Because it shows there's a deep commitment at a personal level. And we all know as leaders of whatever level we are in our organisations, we have influence. And it's how we choose to discharge that influence. And that's a very personal choice, isn't it? But we are bound by that kind of piece. I would just say, because it's good, I just think we have to have honest conversations. We've got so much more to do. We've got so much more to do. Whilst we are proud as an institution of what has been done, it's never done, is it? You can't just sit there and say, well, that's okay. And it is about actions, but it's also, I think, about flexing those actions because things change, dynamics change, scenarios change.
They do. And I totally agree with that. But I think one of the challenges is to get this as part of our everyday behaviour, not just Edie and I.
Yeah.
It's how we behave. It's how we relate to other people in our communities or the communities that we serve. And I think for too long, it's been seen as a add-on, whereas I see what Lloyds is trying to do is trying to make this as a natural part of what it does, which is demonstrated by the strapline. We want Britain to prosper. We want the UK to prosper. And therefore it includes everybody. Everybody has a role to play in that. And I think that's the bit that's really interesting because if you get that part right, it will become natural behaviour. It's not behaviour that's over here for that community.
Completely agree. It's not a bolt-on, is it?
It's not a bolt-on.
And when you're a leader, these things are not bolt-on, optional extras. They're right in the fabric of, what I would argue businesses with influence should be discharging. But the point that I think is really interesting around that is, and to the point you can't just box things or, put them in compartments. That's not how life is it? It's all highly intersectional.
Absolutely.
So if I think about my own employer's purpose, that flows all the way through the intersectionality of helping our housing effort in the UK, which then crosses over into different communities. And, this is a really important thing. Employment skills, business skills to actually start and scale up a business. I always take my hat off to every client and customer I meet, regardless of whether they are turning over £50,000 a year or £100 million a year, which is kind of the customers that I'm privileged to look after. Every single one of them are risk takers, but they will face challenges where bigger organisations have a role to try and unlock some of that opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. So can you share with us, and I know you will have lots, can you share a couple of examples of how Lloyds initiatives, some of the initiatives that you've run, have directly impacted Black entrepreneurs or communities?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to, actually. And there is a bit of a list, so I won't bore everyone with all of them, and that's not the point of this anyway. It's more to your earlier point, which is words are fine, but actions are more important. And also just the context I would set, and this is me setting the context here. Lloyds Banking Group is just like every other business. There are limits to what we can do. There's not an infinite set of resources, and there's obviously a series of stakeholders that need to be balanced. So when the actions are taken, they are deliberate actions, and they're being prioritised over some other actions that could be taken. So one of the first things I call out is from an entrepreneurial perspective. In the last 4 to 5 years, since 2021, we've been delighted and proud to support over 10,000 Black entrepreneurs in business of all shapes and sizes and all sectors and different parts of the UK. And we've done that through accelerators. We've done that through partnering externally with experts in their field, workshops, and then I would argue critically networking, because networking is where I think big professional organisations have great networks, and then opening up those networks. Why wouldn't you do that? But sometimes it's the easy thing to do, and it can facilitate that. And I'm a bit of a simple banker, as you probably know. 10,000 sounds like a little bit of a show and tell number in some respects. It's not meant to be. If you boiled it down to an average per week, which is what I like to get down to, and it doesn't quite work like that operationally, because there's accelerators and programs and high points and low points of any given trading year. That's over 40 Black-led entrepreneurial businesses that have been supported in some form in the last 5 years every week. And for me, I think that's quite important, because then you get this headline. Let's get it down to the brass tacks. What does that mean? There's 40 businesses a week, every day of the week for 5 years. So that's something that we would love to call out. We've got some great partnerships with some external organisations. Foundervine, I would have to call out, who we know really well, obviously. And a couple of points there. In some of the more recent last year, in some of our accelerator program for some of the cohorts of businesses that went through that accelerator, they've already, as a small cohort of businesses, increased their sales revenue by £3 million in aggregate. Wow. They've raised £2 million worth of equity investment coming to their businesses, and they've created a lot of local jobs as well, which is the key thing, because it comes back to prosperity. Absolutely. You're serving communities. That's then raising the bar around prosperity for the communities as well. And then I promise I won't give you the whole list. I promise. Okay. Even though I'm tempted to promise, but and actually, I'll do my final plug will be around the Lloyds Black Business Hub. Which is an online digital resource. There's a lot, I would argue, a lot of fantastic resource and content that's gone into that. And we really encourage visitors. Because if we have visitors, we have engagement. And that's the first step to getting some value add into the business. It might be a risk management thing. It might be access to finance. It might be how to create a marketing plan. It might be entry to some of the events, the accelerators, everything else. And we've actually had over 25,000 visits to our Black Business Hub in the last couple of years. And we're redefining that as we speak through our internal committees to make sure that we are relevant to the way that the business community for Black-led businesses is evolving and changing in the UK.
Wow. Numbers. Those are some big numbers. And as you said, you've got to start somewhere, and you started strong. So
yeah, and I think I shouldn't have the mic, should I? Because now I did want to also call out the partnership that we have with Channel 4. And I'm hoping anyone listening
that was going to be my next question about collaborations, because, we can't do these things alone. We have to collaborate. We have to work with others. And that was going to be my next question about why is it important for you to collaborate? So talking about Black in Business with Channel 4, talking about the way in which Lloyds and Trowers are working together in relation to Launchpad, the Black Business Collective. Why is that important to you?
Yeah, so definitely I'll zone in on the Black in Business partnership with Channel 4, which has now been running for a couple of years or so. Yeah. And I'm hoping that many people listening or watching will have seen that but before their very eyes on our TV screens. But what that is for those that haven't seen this is where we've worked with entrepreneurial Black-led businesses, and through a process of support, these will be our award winners, if I could phrase it in that way. Businesses that we think are going places, but they need help. All right, they need help, because usually we're talking about businesses with a relative lack of scale and a relative lack of resources, which we touched on earlier, which is a small business constraint facing businesses of that size. And so with the partnership with Channel 4, we've actually secured and we fund over £1 million worth of advertising time, because TV advertising isn't cheap, okay? And we're talking about getting those businesses showcased on prime time TV. I'm particularly proud of seeing, when I'm at home, seeing those adverts on live, and I'll be sitting with my family, as I was a few weeks ago, and I can then talk to my family about that. Is something that we're really proud of, and it's also quite amusing because they're sitting in between some of the biggest programs on Channel 4, which have got great traffic flow, great viewer flow, and we've actually had over 30 million views of those adverts for those Black in Business winners. And of course, what does that do for those businesses? It puts them on the national stage. It elevates them very quickly. It actually, interestingly, leads often to a very rapid and significant increase in flow to their own businesses, to revenues, to orders, interest from stakeholders in supply chains or whatever the case may be. And that's really exciting, because then our mentors work with our Black in Business winners, and our mentors are typically from our group executive committee.
Right.
So who we talked about earlier, all in the room, had to have lots of security. At an individual level, our group executive committee members, and we're a FTSE 100 bank, are personally mentoring these businesses. And I think that's great, because then what we then do is elevate through this program, and then we think about, well, what's the next stage of challenge here? Because when you grow a business, as we know, it's not all plain sailing. Absolutely. And actually a sharp increase in your revenue and orders is a lovely problem to have, but it's still a business challenge that needs to be resolved from funding or operational capacity, all of those good things as well. So that's really important to us, to have a national showcase as well.
That's brilliant. And can we talk a little bit about Launchpad? Because obviously UK Black Business Show just took place a couple of weeks ago. I think we've been involved with yourselves and Launchpad since June last year, I think, was the first one. So we've just done our third one in terms of judging. So can you tell us a little bit more about Launchpad and where the idea for Launchpad came?
We're delighted to be involved here. And again, it's another, I think, illustration of taking action and putting kind of money and effort and resources and passion where it matters rather than words. So this is something that Lloyds Banking Group became involved in 2 or 3 years ago. And we could see very quickly, through listening to a number of influential people in the business community, advisors that this is a platform that needs further acceleration and elevation. And so that's where it came from. Okay. And we are quite simple, actually. It's go back to, okay, well, this is our purpose, but what does it mean in practice?
Yes.
And this was where one of the examples of where we lent in. And we've been delighted to see that just grow and grow and grow, and the success grow as well. And what it means to us, again, is a little bit like the Black in Business Channel 4 partnership that we have. We see real businesses going through the Launchpad. And it's not just the winners that win, in my view. There's a whole process of businesses that will pitch, be nominated, be shortlisted. And just through that process, there's a much bigger pool of businesses, Black-led businesses, that are learning from the process, getting support.
Yes.
Often it spins off into other mentorships.
Yes.
Opening new connections.
Yeah.
Because we've got the ability through our partnership
Yes.
to be able to open those up to a broader audience. And so, again, from that perspective, it's really, really important. And we also have the ability then to lean into things maybe in a bit more of a geographic basis.
Yeah.
So we can think about, and different sectors as well. So we see Black-led businesses in some sectors being overly biased in some sectors versus other sectors. So we can tune into that as well and think, what are the unique platforms and support that businesses in those sectors need? And that Launchpad, I think, is absolutely fantastic.
I was fortunate enough to, I was stepping in for a colleague who couldn't make judging day, and it was incredible. It really was. You just literally saw a group of people who didn't know each other come together, but the support, it was almost not like a competition. It was an opportunity, as you said, in a way to learn from each other, watch each other grow, and then have people who weren't the winners say, I'm definitely coming to the show to support you. And then at the show itself, I wasn't supposed to be the judge on the day, but because I then was so invested in the stories, I insisted on being a judge on the day. And I can honestly say, I think on that occasion in June this year, I think we gave the organisers a bit of a nightmare, because we said, well, we'd like the outcome to be X. And they said, no, you have to pick one winner. But I think, as you said, the coaching that the guys received, the advice and the support in between judging day and the show itself, you could see that growth. And you don't lose those skills.
And that energy is infectious, isn't it? Like you say, when anyone that's not been, I'd really, really encourage them to go, to your point. And by the way, I love what you did, okay, because I think you're being a bit modest there, because you gave the organisers a bit of a problem, because you decided that 4 people would win it, not just one, because everybody was worthy, and why not?
Absolutely.
Why not? You don't have to stick to a rigorous kind of programmatic kind of approach to these things. And I think that was fantastic. And that resonates really well, doesn't it? It has a big, big ripple effect.
Absolutely. It really does. Paul, I'm going to ask you something personal now. And it's about, as a white male leader, what drives your personal commitments? We're not necessarily talking about Lloyds. What is your personal commitment to advancing racial diversity and equity in the banking sector? Because it's not just, I know you're also involved with another organisation, which you'll tell us about, but what's the why? Why do it?
Yeah, no, thanks. And that is it's a great question. I think about that a lot, and I know what the answer is in my head, but it kind of evolves. I think I'd probably describe it because, look, I am, as you can see, a white middle-aged chap, maybe more than middle-aged now, who knows. So I think it's fair to say in my business life, and probably in my schooling as well, actually, I was in the majority, okay? And then I'm very, very conscious that, in all aspects of society and life and business, that, some colleagues, clients, stakeholders are not in the majority, if that makes sense. And I'll come on to what I've done about that to try and make myself uncomfortable to actually get a deeper understanding. But I also, in my younger years, came from, people might think, oh, okay, someone works at a bank, they've come from a privileged background. I did not. Okay, I came from a very, very humble working class background. I didn't go to university. Don't ask me about my exam results, please. But I did go into a finance profession 35 years ago that there was probably a little bit of a generalized stereotypical thing that to get to a certain level, you needed to come from a certain background. And so I felt in the minority, actually, for the early part of my career. And I was having to face into that a little bit. So there was something going on there as well. And then I've been fortunate enough to, and privileged enough to have a number of leadership roles in the last 20 or so years of different forms. But then what I started to really tune into was kind of what does being a leader really mean? And for me, without getting too mushy about it, for me, it's about, I work in a commercial organisation, you work in a commercial organisation, all of our clients run commercial organisations. Everyone's selling something, and in the short term, you have commercial objectives. That's really important. But as a leader and a senior leader, will I ever be remembered for a great year of commercial sales? I don't think I will be. Do I want to be remembered for a great year of commercial sales? I don't think I want to be remembered for that. From a leadership perspective, I want to be remembered for, not celebrated, just in my own private moments in the future, when I reflect back and think, did I do the best I could with my platform of influence? Did I try and shape change, sustainable change for the better? And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to say I've done that brilliantly, but I do want to be able to say that I've made progress there, which sticks. And then hopefully, when I'm not around, someone smarter than me will come in and take that as a new platform and take it on to the next piece as well. And from a kind of a race perspective, an ethnicity perspective, I have been privileged to be leading a number of senior roles within the organisation and the previous organisation, actually, around equity and DE&I across the broader intersectional aspect of that, but particularly with a focus on Black heritage. And a few years ago, I asked myself the question, how much do I really know? And the answer was, I'm not sure I do. I'm not really sure I do. And I probably realised I never will truly know because I don't have a lived experience. But I thought, how can I get as close to a lived experience as possible here? And so I did find and seek out an external appointment. And I'm privileged to be part of a racial equity justice charity in another part of the country that's been around for 25 years this year, actually, and does some incredible work right across public policy, corporates, academia, community development, business accelerator development. The list goes on, and I take my hat off. But for me, my journey and why it's important to me is because I am in the minority on that management team. And so it really sort of has helped me a little bit in my own mind, kind of just, I think, get much closer to empathy, understanding, and then shaping what I do as a leader more broadly. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And one question that I would ask is, when you started out on that journey with that organisation, how uncomfortable did you feel?
Really uncomfortable. I don't think I've ever said this to anyone, actually. So too late now, isn't it? It's coming out on a podcast and everything. I was really uncomfortable. I was excited because I sought it out. No one asked me to do this. I kind of went and found this, and it was brilliant. But I do remember going into the first kind of board meeting, management meeting, and I remember actually, I can't really explain the feeling. I can't quite explain it. I probably think I'm quite a talkative individual, as you know. And I'm not usually backwards in coming forward in a broader group in work, whatever the case might be. I was probably quite quiet, actually, when I reflect back. I'm not now, quite noisy on that board. But yeah, I didn't know what my place was. I wasn't quite sure if I actually deserved being there. I think probably that's how it felt. What could I bring? How can I add value here? And I was probably doubting myself in those first 6 months. But after 3 years, it's great. It's really good.
It's such a great answer. It's such a great answer. And so many people listening and watching this will understand in terms of being the only, being in a space where you are in the minority, what it feels like when you're at the table. Can you speak? Will what you say be taken seriously? Will somebody speak over you? So I really do appreciate your honesty in response to that question. So what do you think the financial services sector should be focusing on now to ensure that it's contributing to an inclusive entrepreneurial landscape?
Right, yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Look, I think there's a lot here that it needs to, the banking industry needs
Yeah.
to, and I'm not going to speak obviously for other banks, but I will just collectively call us the banking industry. And I'm sure, my respected competitors would probably tune into this as well, actually. So the trust point is number one. We have, as a banking industry, and I can certainly say that from a Lloyds perspective, we have gained a step change in trust. And we talked a little bit earlier about 3-4 years ago. The trust, understandably, in UK banks, commercial banks, was pretty low. It's below 40% from all of the empirical research and studies that were undertaken. We know that the industry has risen quite a long way from that. And Lloyds is actually our most recent check-in. We're now running at 84%.
Wow.
And that is about 16% better than the UK peer group. But I'm going to make a couple of points there. I'm really pleased the UK peer group has stepped up, because this isn't a competitive issue. This is a collaborative issue. And also, but the other point is 84% isn't good enough. So, of course, we'll strive for perfection, but we appreciate that, there'll always be in life opinions, lived experiences and everything else. But 84%, there's 16% of black-led businesses that for some reason don't say they trust. Now, it might not mean they mistrust, but they're not quite sure enough to go to the trust point. So there's a lot to be done there. So I think we've gained really good ground. I don't think we can walk past what's been happening this year, externally. And that is that's a risk. That's a headwind to potentially seeing that trust erode. We are determined it will not erode from there, and we stand absolutely in the face of any discrimination. And I can absolutely say I and this organisation are anti-racist. We stand there very firmly, but we don't want to lose any ground.
Yeah.
We don't want the external factors to eat away at any of that, and we want to go to the next point. I think the next point will be around. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the barriers for smaller businesses, and we're typically talking about smaller businesses just by the very fact that 99% of UK businesses are small trading businesses. So some of those access to finance points are key. We do know that in small businesses generally, that actually, and surveys, independent surveys tell all of us this, 70% of small businesses actually would prefer not to take lending and would prefer slower growth than taking lending. Now, that's absolutely the prerogative of the owner, the entrepreneur, and everything like that. I would argue that there's maybe something wrong with that, because there needs to be better education around how sensible, responsible lending, debt capital can help the business go to the next stage. And we often see businesses struggle at this 100,000 sales a year ceiling, and it seems to be a bit of a ceiling that businesses can't quite punch through. And some of that you need capital.
Yes.
But you also need financial education. And so there's a lot of work that's gone on. We talked about some of the initiatives, but more broadly, the Black Business Hub has a lot of great resources. But more broadly, we also have what we call the Lloyds Banking Group Academy for Business. It's free to anyone. You don't have to be a Lloyds banking customer to use this.
It's free, and you don't need to be a Lloyds banking group. That's amazing.
I know. Whoever would have thought a bank would say it's free, but it is free. Okay, so just to get that plug in there. But no, that's the point of purpose as well. That costs real money to put in place that could be used elsewhere. But that's the most important thing, because we know that through financial education, business education, and that comes in many forms, whether it's connections, networking, online resources, whatever it might be. So that education and access to finance point, more needs to be done. And I do think we're moving into a phase which is quite exciting. Obviously, we haven't talked about AI today, have we? But, tech, AI, agentic AI, all of that topical and front of mind stuff that's happening in industry and business in society at the moment, I think is also potentially the next stage of unlock. Because as we really get smart around AI, better propositions can land, more predictive help can go into small businesses, because we're always limited by capacity of people. So we've got 1 million business clients in the UK. I don't have 1 million people that can individually, support. So we have to think about these things differently. So I think the next stage is then embracing that technology so that we actually then accelerate that access to finance, access to education, and improve the trust as well.
Oh, that's great. I really love that commitment because, as you said, quite rightfully, there are a lot of organisations looking at themselves and thinking, should I be focusing on this agenda at the moment? And, so much work has been done that it would be a real shame for all of that to be, or a lot of that to be eroded just because of. Thank you for sharing that. Paul, it has been an absolute delight talking to you today.
Likewise.
And I could go on, but I can't. So before we finish, is there one message that you'd like to leave with Black entrepreneurs or the wider business community about the role of Lloyds in this space?
Yeah, look, I don't want to be plugging as such, if that makes sense. So this is not a sales thing. This is genuinely to respond to your question. It's we remain totally committed, to, and we will evolve these things as the years go by, to accelerating inclusion in business across all communities, to helping businesses grow in different ways. And as we discussed, that comes through many different interconnected parts. So the message's commitment is very, very steadfast in that regard. And I'm excited about that. I run a commercial banking business with clients every day of the week, and I want my business to grow. My business can only grow if the businesses that we're serving are growing as well. So, of course, that's commercially aligned in a very, very strong sense. And then I think the final thing I would say, particularly for Black-led businesses and entrepreneurs, would be if you haven't yet had an opportunity to look at the Black Business Hub, please do. Yeah. Please do. And also give us the feedback. And the final thing I would say, which I probably didn't cover earlier, we're also privileged to have in place within Lloyds Banking Group what we call the Black Business Advisory Committee. And the BBAC, we like an acronym in the bank, the BBAC is made up of 12 external businesses that are owned and operated by Black entrepreneurs. And that's an advisory body for me and the business, so that we get that very strong external voice whenever we're thinking about, okay, what do we do a proposition here? How do we lean in there? That is all steered and guided with a very, very good sounding board from the BBAC. And that will also remain in place and thrive as we move forward.
Paul, thank you so much. I am excited to see what happens next with Lloyds Banking Group. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know you are extremely busy, so I really do appreciate you.
I just pretend to be busy, that's fine. Don't tell anyone.
I really do appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to come and speak to me today.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Yetunde. Thank you.